Hello and welcome to the 30th episode. Well, it's really like the 32nd, but the 30th episode of the Pen Podcast. I can never say that. Pen Podcast, Psychic Eye Mystery Podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie, with my schmabulous co-host, sister Sandy. We have been on hiatus for a couple of weeks, and typical of us, we didn't tell you. We didn't let you know that that's where we were. Yeah, we needed a break from just the toil to take a kind of a mental breather. And we both worked furiously on other projects besides the podcast. This takes up a lot of time. Like I give you so much credit, since I mean it's insane. So I have been tasked with writing up today's script, which is why it will be different and briefer, more brief than in previous episodes. So how you been, my sister? How have you been?
I'm
good?
okay.
I love your hair today. It's very pretty. It's very pretty.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is it's getting too long. I have a hairdresser that's ridiculously popular, so it takes weeks of planning to
So
get
you
in.
almost have to book it the time you leave for the next opening
and I do, but then it's like, oh, he's busy that week and he's busy that week. And it's like, well, my hair will be down to Rapunzel level. So can we just get me in at some point?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Good people. It's it's hard to find time with them. Your hair's been cut by my stylist, Lauren. She's fabulous. Just awesome. Awesome. I love her. She lets me actually bring my own hair dryer and hairspray and do my hair. Like she allows that, which I so appreciate, because I can see how there would be lots of stylists who'd be like, no, I cut your hair, I'm gonna finish the job, right? But I know how I like my hair styled, and I want to know that the cut can be styled the way I like to style it. So for me, it solves that problem of being able to walk out the salon and feel like it's myself, and to know that the next day or the next day or whatever, the next time I wash my hair, that when I style it, it will look like me. So yeah, so if you can find a stylist that will allow you to do that, and I bring my own hair dryer because I'm a fucking snob. And then I have a Dyson, which is the greatest hair dryer, and that it's the only hair dryer I'll ever own again, ever. So, and Sandy helped me out with a book tremendously. So as a thank you, I got her one as well. And we're both like converts, like total converts. So they are ridiculously, stupidly expensive. You cannot justify the price for a fucking hair dryer, and yet it's the last hair dryer I will ever own. I love this thing. So
that could be it. I mean, think about all the hair dryers you go through over a lifetime, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. My last one lasted, I think, 15 years
before
I chucked it over the side for the Dyson. I was like, bye-bye, old hot air blow dryer. Out the window.
Yes.
Yeah, there really is a difference with the Dyson. I didn't believe the hype, but it's true. Actually, you were the one that wanted one, right? And then I got it for you. And then
I have a long list of things I want. So
I think you came across it first and you were like, God, I really love one of these. And as a surprise, I got her one and sent it to her. But I had to make sure that it worked properly. So I might have played with it once or twice and then decided, okay, I'm keeping this one and I'm buying her another one.
Right. A different color too. I like this color. It's shiny.
It's like at Christmas, right? I get you one, me one, you one, me one.
Yeah, I don't do that. You're the only person I know. You're coming across as a super control freak right now. I just hope you know that.
No, I just like what I like.
My own hair dryer and hairspray to the hair salon, and I like what I like, and I don't have to yell at anybody about my hair.
Poor Sandy's like, what do you want for Christmas? And I'm like, well, I already bought myself everything, so good luck with that.
Well, worse still, she then tunes in to find out what it is I am getting her.
I don't do that anymore, but you have made stuff some pretty easy, like explodes from your energy, like treadmill. It's like hard not to bump into it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The second you say don't tune, I'm like radar on. radar on. Speaking of radar, let's start today with an anecdote because I have been dying to tell this anecdote. I love this anecdote so much. So I was reading for a woman. This was several weeks ago. So I know that there were more hits in the reading, but this was my favorite moment. So I'm reading for this woman, and her father comes in, and it's like offered up proof, and the proof was definitive, and it was super specific, and it was fabulous. And then he was with a woman to his side, and I didn't feel it was his wife. So there's a kind of a feeling when spirit is with their spouse. There's sort of that love and feeling. It's sort of more of a romantic connection than it is like a sibling sort of connection. And that's what he did. So he brought in this woman, and I didn't quite know who, if it was his mother, or if it was his wife, or if it was, another daughter or something, right? Or a sister. So I said, okay, well, I said, who lives in Kansas? Because in my mind's eye, I saw the map of the United States, and the state of Kansas kind of lifts out, like, hello, notice me. So I said, well, who lives in Kansas? And she's like, nobody. And I'm like, no, someone lives in Kansas. She's like, no. And I'm like, who's from Kansas? Nobody. So I'm getting frustrated, right? Because this map, this whole state has not disappeared, right? So I kept insisting. I'm like, well, how about any of the states surrounding Kansas? Anywhere in there? She's like, everybody, all of our family is from New England. I'm like, God damn it, I can't figure this out. So I'm like yelling at this poor man right on the other side. I'm like, so I see Judy Garland singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I hear we're not in Kansas anymore, which I thought was hilarious, right? And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but your dad just keeps showing me Judy Garland singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and we're not in Kansas anymore. Is running through my mind. And she goes, oh, his sister's name was Dorothy. I was like, oh, I know, right? I didn't connect it. So those are like, I love those moments. I absolutely love those moments because they're so clever. Again, they're just so freaking clever. Absolutely love it. I actually had one, I think 2 days ago, where someone showed me a goldfish. And I'm like, do goldfish mean anything to you? And she's like, no. And I'm like, did you have a goldfish? And then I thought, well, who doesn't, right? Like everybody had a fucking goldfish, right? When they were growing up. And I said, well, I think this was her mom. I said, your mom just keeps showing me this goldfish, and this goldfish is like huge, and it's as big as as the container, and I feel like it's really old. And she goes, oh yeah. She said, the only goldfish I ever had lived forever. And it got really big. So, sometimes they're like, they'll pull these like really super cool specific things. Sometimes a goldfish is a goldfish, but not always. Kansas is where someone is from. So I'm just saying, it's a giant game of charades. You never know what you're gonna get. Okay, and then I have to do out of order book promotion because I had a new release. Coach Red Handed came out this past Tuesday. It is available now everywhere books are sold. My favorite independent bookstore, if you're looking to support independent bookstores, which I highly recommend you do, is Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas. They do a phenomenal job. They carry all of my books. They hand sell my books. They are wonderful, wonderful people. I've known them for 20 years, and they have all done really right by me. If anybody has seen the poster, it's not really a poster. It's actually a piece of aluminum with the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo movie with Daniel Craig, and I can't remember the name of the actress that played the girl. It's not familiar, I am. But anyway, so they had this to promote the movie, which came out in November of
Rooney
2011.
Mara.
Her. Anyway, so they had gotten one of these, and there were very few of those made. And I kept going on and on about how much I loved Daniel Craig, and in this poster, he's just sexy as fuck. The man is just sexy as, oh my God, he's delicious. And he's got his arm wrapped around her, and she's basically nude. The cool thing, well, you know, they've hidden, right, the naughty bits. They've hidden the naughty bits. But anyway, it's in the shape of a razor blade, which I also thought was just a sweet detail, because it's this sharp piece of aluminum. So the owner of the store was kind enough to gift this to me when I was down there, and I said, "Oh, great, I can go to sleep now with Daniel Craig." So I went home and I put him under the covers and I took a photo of just his face on my pillow and sent it to her, McKenna. So yeah, so in any of the book promotion, the point of the story is, if you have seen in any of the book promotion photos of me standing there, you know, signing my name to books, in the background is that poster, and that comes from Murder by the Book. So yeah, they are top-notch, wonderful people. So I highly recommend it. Anyway, this is the fourth, what is it?
Fourth.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh my God, this is ridiculous. Here,
So,
buy this
no,
book.
it's even
I don't
worse
know.
than that. It's even worse than that. I had it in my mind that this was coming out in August. I didn't even look. I get a text from a friend at 4 o'clock on Tuesday. Congratulations on your book release. And I'm thinking, that's not today. Is it? Is it today? Running to the computer, dialing up Amazon. Oh shit, it's today.
Ruh-roh.
So I threw together, I'm calling my neighbor. I'm like, Dustin, get over here and take a picture of me signing books. So he comes over and he's just, I don't know, he's just clicking. He's just clicking. I'm like, you're not. Not one usable photo in the whole mix. I know, it's terrible. Bambi caught in headlights, basically, with a pen. Yeah. So oh God, finally, you know, kind of mounted the phone sort of at an angle, set it on a 10-second timer, ran around the counter, posed, you know, Vogue, boop, boop, boop. Took a photo, slammed it on a newsletter and sent it out to 5,000 of you. Here you go. Guess what came out today?
Oh my You're God, so organized.
Oh my God, it's terrible. It's so terrible. It's really terrible. And every year I'm like, this is going to be the year I'm going to get my act together. Like it's going to happen. I swear it's going to happen someday. The problem is that it came out in the summer.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a great time for a book to come out. Normally it's a great, like perfect July. Everybody's on the beach. They want to read the book. Right. But for me,
Victoria, your book comes out every year in the summer. Okay.
I know, but that's
this
the problem.
Is a random happening.
Sandy,
no, it's not the problem.
Well, you know, it's usually coming out in August, I think. I don't know. Usually, in my mind, it comes out in August. I think. I don't know. I'll have to look. But anyway, the problem is that my brain goes into summer mode. I want to enjoy my summer. So, like, this is the first year in 22 years, literally in 22 years, that I'm taking weekends off for the summer, and probably indefinitely, because I'm enjoying the fuck out of my weekends. So, you know, I'm on summer brain. I'm not on work brain, you know? So that's what's hard, because once you get into summer brain, after 22 years of working every fucking day on something, always, you know, either clients or writing or whatever else I do, podcasting, whatever. I finally have decided weekends are mine, and I'm not giving them back. I'm going to be kind of quasi-normal. Anyway, I digress. So everywhere books are sold, Coach Red-Handed. I was really happy with the way that this story came out. Basically, Kat and Gilly, it's the end of Gilly's marriage. His ex, Michelle, is coming to clean out his stuff from the guest house where Kat lives. Chez Kitty. Chez Kat is where Kat lives. Chez Kitty is the guest house. And Gilly's really depressed, so Kat offers up a European vacation. So as they're planning this, of course, there's one last client that they have to work for. Kat's a life coach, so she goes into a session with this woman, Scarlett Ruby, and Scarlett is being overrun by her very toxic family. Scarlett is a very successful, wealthy romance writer, And her family is just bleeding her dry, basically. So Kat advises her to take her life back and cut them all off. And they arrange for a meeting with the family, pull that off with success. The next day, Scarlett is found, murdered. So, and then hijinks ensue. So, I kind of love the twist. What do you think of the twist in this one?
I'm going to plead the fifth because in classic me mode, very literal, I could not for the life of me figure out what the hell was going on. And I had to read it 3 or 4 times. Then I had to ask you about it. And then you made fun of me like you usually do when I read your books and I can't figure out what the hell's going on and mock me for years after. So pleading the fifth this time.
Can I bring up the tiger in the cage? Can I bring up what is? I sent Sandy a copy of
Yeah,
a
here
book
we
that
go.
was
Here we go.
released, and
In
she
the
reads it.
summer,
I don't. Yeah, I don't know. You were very, very busy at the
I had a
time.
new puppy. I had a
Right.
new job. I had
Right.
a lot of new things going on that were distracting me. So
Yeah, and I
was
think
not
Abby
was
had been,
not
Abby had
sleeping.
been kidnapped, and she was strapped to a bomb.
I
And
couldn't
Sandy
figure it
was
out.
like, "Why is she in a cage?"
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I read.
Why is Abby in a cage? Like, she's not in a cage. Is there a tiger in the
Yeah.
cage?
I couldn't figure it out. And it's not her writing. It was just my distracted focus. So apparently you can
some
be
of it was probably my
distracted and
writing.
I cannot. So I'm with you now. We're
Yeah.
good.
Well, that one
Yeah.
was that book was you had to kind of hit it because it had dual timelines. So every other chapter was a different timeline, the back and forth. Um, so one timeline was basically written over hours, like 2 or 3 hours. You had like the countdown for the bomb to blow up. And then the other chapters were what led up to Abby being strapped to a bomb. So yeah, that was a cool book. I like that one.
It was.
Anyway, okay, so I digress. So next week we'll be back with another Abby and we'll talk about the Abster. But today our mystery is the death of Marilyn Monroe. And remember, I wrote this copy, not Sandy, so I'm sure it's not going to be like as fluid and sweet and fun as or as detailed as hers normally are.
This should be fun.
Winging it. We're winging it.
Everybody wish me luck reading this, please.
Yeah, typical me fashion. I edited it like 5 minutes before we went on air, but whatever. Last minute Laurie rides again.
Okay. So in the early morning hours of August 5th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe, arguably the most famous woman in the world, was discovered naked, lying face down on her bed, lifeless. The evening before, August 4th, Marilyn had gone to bed early at approximately 8:30 p.m. And in the days, weeks, and months leading up to her death, Marilyn had been noticeably struggling with mental illness, depression, and drug and alcohol addiction. With her that evening was her loyal housekeeper, Eunice Murray, who'd been convinced to stay with Marilyn that evening by her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who'd been worried about her mental state of mind. Marilyn had begun seeing the psychiatrist several months earlier after the breakup of her marriage to writer Arthur Miller, and after having suffered several miscarriages during their tumultuous marriage. When Marilyn left New York for LA, she'd started seeing Greenson, who'd also welcomed her into his family to give the mega movie star a sense of familial support. Dr. Greenson did not think that Marilyn was in danger of committing suicide that evening or in the days leading up to that night, but he was concerned enough about her ongoing psychological struggles and addictions to amphetamines, alcohol, and barbiturates that he convinced Eunice to stay over at her house. According to the official police report, at approximately 3 a.m. on August 5th, Eunice awakened to a noise and got up to check on Marilyn. The housekeeper discovered her boss's bedroom light on, but Marilyn was unresponsive to Eunice's repeated knocks and attempts to wake her. Fearing the worst, Eunice made her way outside to peer into Marilyn's bedroom window and found her lying face down on her bed, again unresponsive to Eunice's repeated attempts to wake her by yelling and knocking on the window. In a panic, the housekeeper quickly placed a phone call to Dr. Greenson, begging for assistance. When Dr. Greenson arrived and peered into the same bedroom window, he became alarmed enough to break the glass and gain entry into her bedroom. He found Marilyn's body cold with no obvious signs of life. Next to her bed were the numerous prescription bottles, many empty. Marilyn's hand was outstretched, resting on the phone as if she'd been about to call someone for help, but the call was never placed. The official coroner's report cited probable suicide given the large quantity of barbiturates and alcohol in her system. Marilyn had consumed approximately 40 pills, which would have put her quickly into a coma followed by death. There was also an extensive history of suicidal thoughts, mental illness, feelings of isolation and loneliness, insomnia, and drug and alcohol dependence. All of these factors likely factored into that fateful moment when Marilyn ingested those 40 pills, washing them down with alcohol. And yet, for the last 50 years, nefarious rumors surrounding the circumstances of the movie star's death have persisted. Born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1st, 1926, to a mentally fragile mother and a father who abandoned the family shortly after she was born, Norma Jean's childhood was turbulent, peppered with an unstable home life where she was moved from foster home to foster home and even to an orphanage. In one such foster home, Norma Jean was molested, and at age 16, she entered into her first marriage with a merchant marine simply to escape having to re-enter the system. By the time she was 18, she was bored of married life and turned to modeling. At the age of 20, Norma Jean had adopted the stage name Marilyn Monroe and signed her first acting contract with Fox in August of 1946. For the next few years, Marilyn would routinely be cast in small roles while taking acting lessons and modeling on the side, waiting for her big break. And then in 1950, at the age of 24, Marilyn finally signed a contract with 20th Century Fox that would move her up the ladder a bit, and she began to take supporting roles in various films. Her popularity grew, and in 1952, she began dating Joe DiMaggio, whom she would later go on to marry. The relationship between the movie actress and the baseball legend helped bring notice to Marilyn's acting career, and her popularity really began to soar. By 1954, Monroe was one of 20th Century Fox's biggest stars. She and Joe married in January of that year, but the marriage was troubled from the start, and they divorced only 9 months later. In 1956, Marilyn was dating playwright Arthur Miller, and the pair socialized with politically far left-leaning circles. At about that time, the FBI began a file on Marilyn, and they famously labeled her a communist. Privately, Marilyn began to struggle with drug and alcohol addiction, which was her way of dealing with an increasingly fragile mental state. At one point, Marilyn even had a mental breakdown and spent several weeks receiving psychiatric care and counseling at a local hospital. When she emerged from her stay at the hospital, she was hounded by the press, which caused her even further distress. By 1960, Marilyn's marriage to Miller was crumbling, and her health had also taken a turn for the worse. Plagued by gallbladder attacks, gallstones, and endometriosis, Marilyn's dependence on barbiturates and amphetamines was now causing serious problems on the set. In 1961, she and Miller divorced, and Marilyn took a 6-month hiatus from acting to move from New York to Los Angeles, where she purchased a Spanish bungalow in Brentwood. There, she was a regular visitor to her friend Peter Lawford's home, which he shared with his then-wife, Patricia Kennedy, who was the sister to President Jack Kennedy and the Attorney General Bobby Kennedy. It was after meeting the brothers at the Lawfords that Marilyn began to have an affair with both brothers, but was far more serious about Bobby Kennedy than Jack Kennedy. Because the dinners and the get-togethers at the Lawfords usually involved conversations about politics, Marilyn began to study politics, and she was known to ask probing questions of the Kennedys to better understand the political landscape. And it was also during this time that Marilyn came under the care of Dr. Ralph Greenson, who treated her for depression and anxiety. Greenson was concerned enough about Marilyn's mental health that he often invited her to participate in family functions at his home, offering her a sense of belonging and something that she had lacked and craved her entire life. Within the contextual background of all of that was going on with Marilyn's involvement with the Kennedy brothers were two key things. Bobby Kennedy was actively investigating the head of the Teamsters Union, Jimmy Hoffa, and his connection to organized crime, and the global stakes in the Cold War were ratcheted up when the Soviet Union took Cuba under its wing, posing an imminent threat to the United States by giving the Soviet Union a territory from which to easily launch nuclear missiles. Dinner conversations at the Lawfords often reflected the U.S.'s progress developing a nuclear missile program of its own. As a result of the president's careless talk among private citizens of classified information and the fact that Hoffa was actively trying to get any dirt he could on Bobby Kennedy, the FBI placed several listening devices in Marilyn's home. By August of 1962, Bobby Kennedy was so alarmed by the threat of exposure posed by his and his brother's affair with Marilyn that he flew out to Los Angeles to attempt to confront Marilyn and break things off with her. When she begged off an invitation to the Lawfords for dinner on August 4th, Bobby contacted her directly and instructed Marilyn to stop calling the White House and to stop calling his office. A visibly shaken and furious Marilyn hung up on Bobby, and within a few hours, Marilyn Monroe would be found dead of barbiturate and amphetamine overdose. News of Marilyn's death spread like wildfire across the globe, and shortly thereafter, conspiracy theories began to swirl around the circumstances of her death. with many blaming the Kennedys either directly or indirectly for her demise. Still, others struggled that Jimmy Hoffa and his mafia connections might have played a hand. If Hoffa was indeed intent on curtailing Bobby Kennedy's investigation into him, could he have ordered Marilyn's murder as a way to get either even or warn both Bobby and Jack to back off? Or might someone else entirely be responsible for her death, perhaps a jilted lover? Or was it her death the result of an accidental overdose? In 1982, with rumors of foul play persisting, the Los Angeles County District Attorney John Van de Kamp conducted a threshold investigation into the circumstances surrounding Marilyn's death and found absolutely no evidence of foul play. Still, even to this day, rumors of Marilyn's mysterious death continue to circulate. So the mystery is, was it murder? Was it an accident? Was there a cover-up? And if so, who was involved? And Victoria, if you'll share the sources for this story, that would be great.
Yeah, so Wikipedia and Wikipedia, there are two actually Wikipedia pages on Marilyn that give a lot of this detail, which is just her own Wikipedia Marilyn Monroe page, and then the death of Marilyn Monroe Wikipedia page. And then much of the sort of background about what was going on in the background during this time came from a fabulous actually documentary on Netflix called the Marilyn Monroe mystery, the unheard tapes. The voice, the narrator of that documentary is Anthony Summers, who was a British reporter. And in the early 2000s, I think it was, he was tasked with digging into Marilyn Monroe's death. Or maybe this was in the 80s. I think it was in the 80s, right around the time that the LA district attorney was sort of doing that threshold investigation. So he expected that the investigation would take like 3 days, and he was on it for years, for years, like 11 years or something. What I have always thought was that there was a cover-up related to Marilyn Monroe. I just intuitively just knew there was some kind of a cover-up. I assumed the cover-up had to do with her demise, like she was probably murdered. That was my thinking, especially because the hand on the phone, and the 40 pills consumed so quickly. But Summers actually takes you through interviews with so many of the people who were kind of around Marilyn at that time. And you can listen to them on tape, and it's absolutely fascinating. But his conclusion at the end of this was actually that there was a cover-up, but it wasn't her death that they were necessarily, wasn't her suicide, or excuse me, her murder that they were covering up. It was the fact that the FBI had placed listening devices all over her home, and they had to go in and recover those before the police arrived so that they would not be discovered and so that it wouldn't be linked back to Bobby Kennedy. Because Bobby Kennedy had flown out on a private jet to LA. He was there approximately 6 hours, something like that, a short period of time, wherein he was supposed to confront Marilyn, and she wouldn't go to the Lawfords for dinner. So then he called her and was like, we're done. Don't ever call my office again. Don't call JFK's office again, blah, 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 because she was floating in these far left kind of circles, the Arthur Miller kind of circles. And many of these people had sympathized with Cuba and people in Cuba. And here, Jack Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, a short time previous to Marilyn's death, had gone to a nuclear test facility and watched a nuclear bomb explode, right? So they had intimate knowledge of where the United States was, and it's obviously they had intimate knowledge in the stages of its nuclear development program, and they were kind of loose-lipped at the Lawfords because they're amongst family and friends, and loose-lipped. And there was a very famous private investigator who was hired by Hoffa. He was hired by the Teamsters, then he was hired by local police, then he was hired by the Kennedy. He had all of these contracts, and everybody was trying to find dirt on everybody else. So he was playing everybody against everybody. And Hoffa hired him to try and dig up dirt on Bobby Kennedy because Bobby Kennedy was really bringing the tax to Hoffa, and Hoffa knew it. And there was a probe into banking transactions, and it's just really looking bad for Hoffa. And I don't know how long after this it was that Hoffa just disappeared, but I would imagine it was fairly soon after that. So so the FBI, because the Kennedys are being so loose-lipped about the nuclear program being developed in the U.S., and the Cold War is kind of reaching its apex, they wanted to make sure that Marilyn wasn't having conversations with known spies, so to speak. So the story goes, and this I believe 100% because it really rang every bell on my intuition about the cover-up. But I didn't really get that's how someone could have forced these pills down her throat. Well, Marilyn was obviously suffering from depression and anxiety and addiction. She was in a terrible state of mind at that time. And Bobby, who she's clearly in love with, enamored with and in love with, she used to call him the general, calls her up, is cruel and cold, like, we're done. Like, don't ever call me again. Don't ever call Jack again. Because Marilyn was known to just call the White House. She was just known to, like, call Jack, like, it's a Sunday, let's call Jack, right? So these two men used and abused her routinely. She was, Marilyn was a free spirit, and she was getting it on apparently with both brothers, kind of not simultaneously, but one and then the other. And they treated her like trash. They treated her like dirt, which is really, really a shame because she was so fragile mentally at this time. So she gets this phone call from Jack. It's called off. And I believe very strongly that in that moment, she just wanted out. She just wanted to go. And so she consumed the 40 pills, drank the alcohol, and it put her into a coma. Now, in the interviews that Summers conducts, he discovers that Eunice, who was the housekeeper, actually contacted Greenson much sooner than 3 a.m. So there was a call to Marilyn's publicist right around 11 p.m. He was out at a play with his wife. And his wife remembers that the message said, "You have to go to Marilyn Monroe's house. There's a crisis. Go." So he leaves to go to Marilyn's house. Greenson goes over to Marilyn's house right around that time period. They actually find Marilyn alive. She's still breathing. They throw her in an ambulance. The ambulance heads off to the hospital. She dies en route. Now what do? They turn the ambulance around. They bring her back. They stage her. They stage her body. The FBI comes in. They clean house. They're not done until about 3 a.m. And that's when Eunice calls the police and says, "Hey, we've got an issue here." So there was a cover up. But it just wasn't Marilyn's murder. It was the cover up of the listening devices in her home that the FBI put in there. So that's what I believe happened. That's truly what I believed happened. I really, really recommend the documentary. It's fascinating. It's very well done. And it's just kind of interesting to hear these famous people talking about Marilyn in a way that is like whispered, that they are almost afraid to say these things because the FBI was involved, and they had a whole file on Marilyn, and they labeled her a communist. And even, into the 80s, this was dicey territory to be talking about. So yeah, that's what I believe happened. The poor love, the poor thing, 36, and she's so talented. She was so breathtakingly beautiful, so talented, and so used, so used. I actually watched another documentary last night that was really reminded me of Marilyn. It was on Pam and Tommy Lee, and it was about their sex tape. You don't see the sex tape, which is good. It's just kind of talked about, and it was interesting to see the parallels of how Pamela was treated. So similar to Marilyn, She was the slut. She was slut shamed. It was her fault. Here she is. She's married on her honeymoon, having sex with her husband on a private boat with a private video that gets put into a 500-pound safe in their garage. The safe is stolen, blown open. The tape is stolen and then distributed worldwide, right? So Pamela was blamed for that. And there are people still to this day that believe she had something to do with that leak. And it's really, the way that we treat these beautiful women, we want to be them, we want to be with them. And then, we're fine to denigrate them. We're fine to punch them when they're down. And I just think it's terrible. Honestly, I think it's terrible. So that's another really good documentary, by the way.
Speaking of, Netflix just released, I think about a week after our podcast on DB Cooper, the story behind DB Cooper and the research that one particular investigator has devoted a significant amount of time to, and also worth watching on Netflix, the mystery behind DB Cooper and the various theories that different investigators have put forth. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Do they agree with me?
Yes. Well, let me put it to you this way. Some do and some don't, but the bulk of the focus is on Robert Rackstraw and
right.
whom you identified as DB Cooper. He passed away in 2019. So
wow,
the mystery died with him. If it was him, it died with him.
That's fascinating. And then on the prediction scale, putting out the prediction, it's interesting to see what's already unfolding that I said would start to happen. So the Fed just did a rate hike. It was a half point higher than I thought it was going to be. I think that the 0.75 3/4 point bump in interest rate is a little excessive. I will be honest with you. That shocked me because that's a 1.5 percentage bump in total, and that's tough. That's tough. Still, I was in the mortgage industry back in the early to mid 90s, and interest rates then were 8, 9, 10%. So they're basically what 3.25, 3.25, 4%. So relative, right? It's all relative. Still, that's a hit for a lot of people.
I will say this. I think unfortunately Americans have gotten comfortable with a low interest rate, and it's enabled us to become very debt laden.
Yeah.
And when interest rates go up, it's extremely disruptive because you've been counting on having a low interest rate to pay off that debt. So while interest rates were higher in the past, the reality is we were not as intensely in debt as the bulk of Americans are today. So it is very negative, unfortunately.
Well, the low interest rates really were fueled by the home renovation loans. So they were really fueled by the cash out refis, and people were using that cash initially to update their homes, which I'm all in favor of. But then they started to exceed the 80-20%. So 80% mortgage with 20% equity. They started to push that to 90, 95%, 98%, sometimes cash out refi. And you were just underwater, like automatically. You can update your house all you want. You're not going to recoup a 18 point percentage point jump for a new kitchen. It's not going to update. It's not going to accelerate your value that much. So that got kind of taken to extreme. That whole deregulation of the mortgage industry really, of course, people were able to make quick cash fast. So of course they took advantage of the system and put people in terrible mortgages. But live and learn, right? Still, 1.5 point bump. That's tough, especially if you're looking for a new house. If you're like finally able to qualify for a house, you've got some student debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you finally are able to kind of qualify for a house. That 1.5 percentage point bump, that's hard. That hits you hard. That takes you from being able to afford a decent home to one that's a little less decent. So that was a tough hit. I thought it was a little excessive. We'll see. But that's something that's already happened. And then indictments are looming and probably coming out this fall. So
get your popcorn. Just get your popcorn ready.
I know. And then with regard to people's long-term finances being really rock solid and stable, well, we've just had the CHIPS Act passed, and we're about to have the the rebranding of the Build Back Better bill pass, and that's going to funnel a shit ton of money into manufacturing, which will help stabilize the undercurrent of the economy and produce jobs, good paying jobs. And now I know why the threshold for those long-term finances, that foundation is there, because the economy, I think, is going to continue to do well. So I know there's all this talk about, recession. I gotta be honest, I'm just not seeing it. If it happens, okay, I'm okay to be wrong, but I just don't, it's not there. I don't see, I know people are talking about, oh, layoffs are coming. Okay, well, none of my clients are being laid off. Normally I see like that pattern. I'll see that pattern kind of play out. And I just haven't seen those patterns in any of the readings that I've been doing. So if I start to see those patterns, of course, I will adjust, like that on the hatch, just people. You really should throw some savings into a, just in case fund anyway, but still, I'm just not seeing what I saw leading up to 2007, 2008. That was a different thing. So if we have a recession, I don't know, that's going to be a huge hairy deal. If you lose your job, yeah, that's a huge hairy deal. But overall, I just don't see it. So we'll see. Time will tell. But it's kind of interesting to see some of this. Oh, and then the other thing was where I was like, I really think Gavin Newsom is going to run for president, and I think he's going to build a really, really strong ticket, and I think he's going to recruit Pete Buttigieg. Now, that may or may not happen, but I saw some rankings that came out the other day for the Democratic primary, who are the favorites. Kamala is first, obviously. It's her race to lose. Buttigieg is second, and Newsom is third. And this is very, very early. This is not until 2024, but I just thought it was interesting that I picked up Newsom before he kind of landed on the radar of, yeah, he could be a real contender. And I feel he could. I feel he could be an amazing contender. So we'll see. We'll see. And then Sandy, you had asked me today, did I think that Trump was going to get the primary nod, or was it going to be DeSantis? Well, that is that's a cloudy kind of issue, because the ether is very turbulent where that is concerned. So there isn't anything necessarily solid. But when I look, I see him leading the pack for the primary. And the race then is, if he's convicted before the presidential election, right, then he's done. He's got probably the best worst chance in Georgia of being convicted of interfering in that election, with just find me 11,780 votes. So that AG is very aggressive, and it's likely that he could face some jail time. So, and that trial, I don't think would take a long time. The appeal process might, but he would be staring down the face of a conviction. So that might take him out. And if he's taken out, I think DeSantis then is sort of he's the obvious, the Murdochs are supporting DeSantis at this point. So you've got the whole machine behind him. So that would be a very interesting contest, really, that I don't even want to speculate on yet. But it's never dull around here in US politics. At least not lately. So yeah, so that's about it. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for my emails are all filling up with people. Where's the podcast? Where's the podcast? Well, we needed a break. We just needed a moment. These are a lot of work. But we're trying to get some momentum under us again. Hopefully it won't be another 3 weeks before we put out another one. Thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed our podcast so far, please click the like button, ring the bell, and subscribe to our channel. That would be awesome. And thanks so much for joining us. And if you would like to know more about me, more about the books, or sign up for a psychic medium reading, please visit victorialaurie.com. Laurie is spelled Leurae, and I'll post a link in the description too for you. So that's about it. All right. All right, Zans. I love you lots.
Love you too. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Bye.
Bye.